yeah, that's what I need is a third fucking thing. Okay. Top chat. Live chat. Let's go to. Alright. Looks like we're getting started. Getting people to come in. Give them a minute or two. Set everything up. Son of a bitch. Alright. Welcome all to Fresh Faces, New Ideas. My name is David. This is our weekly live stream. There's a lot to cover. We got a lot. News keeps coming. Stuff that I had to leave out. I spent the last 4 or 5 hours just looking up stuff just to make sure I have everything right. And there's still stuff that, pops up in the last couple of seconds. Anyway, if you like the channel, like and subscribe. If you don't like the channel, you should hate, like, and subscribe. If you're new to the channel, you should like and subscribe anyway. Either way, you should like and subscribe to the channel. You can follow me on Twitter at Faces Ideas. And, welcome to the channel. We'll give it a little bit. Got a lot to go over. Let's see. We got a whole bunch of base stories before we go into the title stuff. We have, we got the minimum wage bill. We got to talk about the bone marrow stuff. We're going to do a little Tucker Carlson. We're going to talk about the new political party that's been brewing among Republicans that just popped up today. Then we're going to go into the actual stories that I did research in and we're covering. So we have James O'Keefe. James O'Keefe was the founder of Project Veritas. He was thrown off Twitter. Republicans think this is bad because James O'Keefe is just an upstanding citizen. He's not a con man, grifter, lying person who just makes disinformation and spreads it. We're going to go look through his... We're going to ignore this CNN one because that just came out and I'm not going to watch it. It's not worth my time. I just assume he's lying, but there's that. So we're going to go over James O'Keefe's the last two ones, which is the Ilhan Omar is paying people for ballots, and then they found a postal worker who they said they were shredding ballots, and I think it was 8 to 10 ballots or something. But this is what the right wing used as a smear to say that the whole election was fraud. And the Ilhan Omar one was released early in order to go against the New York Times story that was bad for Donald Trump. I don't remember which exactly story it was. And then let's see, we got more mass shootings, and we have more police violence. We're going to go over those. And there's a lot of that. There's, as we speak, there was a mass shooting this morning with FedEx. There was a police shooting in Portland at Lent Park that just happened. So the information on that one's still coming out. Texas did some gun stuff. Merrick Garland did some gun stuff. For all the people who are just joining, please like and subscribe. And this is just a two brief asides before we get into the pre main part stuff. Two stories. Mike Lindell had a social media program. It was called Frank, I believe. He originally said it was any free speech was allowed, and then it turned out you couldn't do porn, you couldn't swear certain things, you couldn't take God's name in vain. That's the last I heard. And apparently, we're shooting this Friday the 16th. They sent out some type of message to people on Parler or Telegram or one of those other apps to say, hey, if you join this now, you get a free access. You get a VIP access when it opens at 12. And this was at 12 last night on Thursday. And apparently that never happened. They have no idea. The people who signed up are like, what is happening? So there's a possibility that Frank doesn't exist because I think we're about a month away from the Donald Trump one, which with Jason Miller just responded to. And he had something going on in the news, and I don't know about that. We then got bad news followed by potentially better news. Was originally the Biden administration was going to keep the Trump caps for the refugees that were allowed into the country. So this is from overseas. These are people who have applied. They've gone through the process. They've been vetted. They're allowed to come in. Trump slashed it to historically low levels, and Biden promised to raise it up. Earlier today, he said that they were going to keep it there, and then next year they'd raise it. But then he realized, oh, wait, that's one of the only promises that I really had that I'm capable of doing something about. So he decided to change them. According to Jen Psaki, the press secretary, sometime by May 15th, we will have an updated hire list. Now, let's be clear about who these refugees are. They're already vetted. They're literally just waiting for him to sign a piece of paper that says that more of them can come in. Okay? They've gone through the service. They've gone through all the paperwork. They've done all of that. They basically are living in airports waiting for Joe Biden to say, come to America now, because you can come to America. And before all those people go, no more refugees, no more brown people. Stop. That's not how this works. You're allowed to go through asylum. It's allowed. It's in our laws. It's part of why there's such a problem at the borders, because there's a backlog because we cut off all the asylum anyway. So all these people can come through because they've already been vetted and they're already allowed to. That's how our laws work. It's things like that. So that's good there. So it's good. We'll see what he actually puts it up to, and I'm glad this pressure worked. So now we're going to go on to into the other stories, and this is a pressure campaign that progressives need to kill this bill. This is a bad bill. So for those of you who are watching, this says Romney Sinema teaming up on a proposal to raise minimum wage. Oh boy, that sounds good, doesn't it? So many pop-ups. Senators Mitt Romney and Kristen Sinema are teaming up on a bill to increase the minimum wage. Now let's remember, the Senate parliamentarian said during the COVID bill that you can't put the $15 minimum wage in the COVID bill because somehow that doesn't have something to do with the economy. However, there's a couple of things that they could have done. They could have just fired her and got a different one, or just overruled her. Both of the things they could have done. They chose not to. So instead, what ultimately happened was Bernie introduced an amendment that said by 2025 the minimum wage would be $15 an hour. Now let's be clear. $15 an hour minimum wage is the compromise position. We're currently at $7.25. It hasn't been raised since 2009. If it had kept up with inflation, it's somewhere between $20 and $25 an hour, possibly higher. So 15 is the compromise position. So, however, it appears that we have to go for the compromise to the compromise. And this is the problem with his jobs bill as well. Joe Biden is pushing for 28% corporate tax rate, and from there he would, negotiate with Republicans. The problem is that people like Joe Manchin want us to have a 21% corporate tax rate, or 25%. So here's what he has to do. He has to understand that whatever he thinks is the moderate position, he has to go higher so that he can come down to whatever his original position is. Because when you do negotiations, unless you're about to tell Joe Manchin, suck it up, you're going with 28%, you're not getting a different number. So there's that. Okay, so the other thing is, what does this appear to be? This appears to be about $11. That seems to be roughly the number that they're proposing. Now, $11 is not enough. It isn't. 15 is barely enough. 7.25 is not enough. This bill, the progressives have to kill it. I don't care if they say, oh, you're killing the minimum wage. This is not. If we pass an $11 per hour minimum wage, I don't know if this doesn't say when it will actually come out, but when the increase will finish. But the main part of this has to be, you can't have this $11 passed, because if you pass this $11, we're not going to get another increase for a decade. It's just not going to happen. So they have to kill this and fight for 15, because that is the goal. And let's be clear, must pass legislation. If he wants Joe Biden wants his jobs program to go through, he needs every single Democrat, and he needs them all in the House. There's enough of them in the House that they can push for something else and force him to compromise on this. And that's what they need to do. So let's go to Tucker. Now, I skipped into this. Now, this is not Tucker talking about vaccines, because he does have an issue with the vaccines. Very briefly on vaccine stuff, Johnson & Johnson has paused it for a couple days to a week because it's having similar issues to the AstraZeneca the vaccine. And I was looking into this. I couldn't figure out if AstraZeneca was 1 or 2 shots. But it gives you a rare form of blood clots. The problem is the people are going to use this as a form of vaccine hesitancy when it's not that. Because the people who've had the blood clots, it's been 6 out of 7 million. So this is similar to the Texas voter fraud thing, where there's literally less than a 1 in a million chance that you can actually get this blood clot. I think they're pausing it mostly to say, okay, doctors, if you start seeing somebody with these symptoms, however rare it is, you can't treat it the normal way, because apparently whatever this blood clot is, it's not the same as a regular blood clot. You have to treat it differently. So so what this clip of Tucker Carlson is he's going to spout some white supremacy. He's going to advocate for something. First, what he's going to advocate for is incredibly stupid, just the way he phrases it. But he's also going to advocate something called the Great Replacement Theory. The Great Replacement Theory is a neo-Nazi theory that white people are going to be driven out of Europe and replaced by brown people. This is not me saying this. I will show you that is the actual definition. Okay, so let's see what Tucker has to say. I don't even know who he's talking to.
Little gatekeepers on Twitter become literally hysterical if you use the term replacement, if you suggest that the Democratic Party is trying to replace the current electorate, the voters now casting ballots, with new.
So this doesn't make sense for a lot, because why would they want to replace these people when Donald Trump won a higher share in 2020 than he did in 2016? Also, how are they doing that? I guess his argument is, they're allowing mass migration to replace you, but you're still here. You haven't gone away. So these people still exist. So unless you're also arguing that they're going to murder you, which I'm sure at some point he probably will, or has, this doesn't make any sense.
People, more obedient voters from the third world. But they become hysterical because that's what's happening.
Okay, hold on. That's where it is. They're going to replace you with more obedient voters from the third world. That's where the racism is. That's where the replacement theory comes into.
The current electorate, the voters now casting ballots, with new people, more obedient voters from the third world. But they become hysterical because that's what's happening, actually. Let's just say
it's not happening. I don't even understand how we could argue it's happening unless you're doing it in bad faith and know that your audience are Nazis.
That's true. If this was happening in your house, if you were in 6th grade, for example, and without telling you, your parents adopted a bunch of new siblings and gave them brand new bikes and let them stay up later and help them with their homework and gave them.
So his analogy doesn't make any sense, because the people who come here, even if his argument is the people come here illegally are going to replace their voters, they don't get special treatment. They're second-class citizens for a reason. It's because they're not here legally. They have to hide in the shadows of the system, because if they don't, then they will be deported, or they will be, or the police will get them. But they're not treated better.
Twice the allowance that they gave you. You would say to your siblings, I think we're being replaced by kids that our parents love more. And it would be kind of hard to argue against you, because look at the evidence. So this matters on a bunch of different levels, but on the most basic level, it's a voting rights question.
So he's going to argue this is a voting rights question, because that's what it all comes down to, voting rights. Let's see how he says that this is a voting rights question.
In a democracy, one person equals one vote. If you change the population, you dilute the political power of the people who live there. So every time they import a new voter, I become disenfranchised.
That's what he said. Every time, so it's one person, one vote. So yes, nobody's arguing that the people who are coming in get more than one vote, or that they get a vote if they are not actually citizens, because that's not a thing that happens. Despite Republicans saying that over and over again, voter fraud is both nearly non-existent and isn't done by illegals voting. It just isn't. Those aren't things that happen. So the other thing he says is, when you import new voters, that dilutes the new vote, the old voters. Now, Tucker, that is unbelievably and does make no sense at all, because what happens when somebody turns 18? That's a new voter. So are you arguing that there should be no new voters at all? Because anytime a person turns to 18, they're diluting your voting power. Also, if I move from from New York to Texas, am I diluting the voting power of Texans? Look, this makes no sense. The whole point of what he's trying to do is walk back this statement that it's the great replacement theory. So let's look at more of this. So Tucker Carlson, he says it's a voting right question. It's a democracy. You dilute the political power every time I disenfranchise. He's not arguing against illegal immigration. He's arguing against any immigration. So anytime there's a new citizen, there's his voting powers. His voting powers is diluted. So let's take a look at the Great Replacement Theory. The Great Replacement Theory is a white nationalist conspiracy theory which states that with complicit or cooperation of replacement elitists, the white French population as well as white European population at large is being demographically and culturally replaced by non-European people. Specifically, Arabs, Berbers, South Asians, and Sub-Saharan Muslim populations from Africa and the Middle East through mass migration, demographic growth, and a European drop in birth rates. So, this is basically Fox News' argument to a T. They're trying to replace you with brown people because they want more voting power. And this just isn't true on any level. It's just not an accurate description of what's happening. It's not an accurate description of anything that's coming out. So, Tucker Carlson is going about as mask off as you can. They're arguing this is also part of the white genocide theory, which he proposed in the African farmers. This is something he pushed 3 years ago. So this is not something new. So look, Fox News, by allowing Tucker Carlson to go on his air, because this is well documented, they're allowing this man to push for racist, white nationalist, neo-Nazi conspiracy theories. And they're allowing it to happen. They could get rid of him at any time, but they're not going to. In fact, what you just saw was his new show. So it's not like he's going anywhere, but people need to be aware these are the things he's pushing. So let's talk about my two favorite Congress people and also the two dumbest people in Congress. So this is the headline for it. Marjorie Taylor Greene and Lauren Boebert are lone lawmakers to vote against the National Marrow Donor Program. Now this gets re-upped every 5 years. So it was passed 415-2. So there's 12 representatives who didn't vote. I don't know why they didn't vote. It doesn't make clear. But here is the reasoning for this. Now, what this bill does, and I was trying to go further down into the rabbit hole with what this does, is it says it right here. The Be the Match Registry, which pairs donors with patients who have leukemia and other diseases, has facilitated more than 150,000 bone marrow transplants and more than 40,000 blood clot transplants. So what this bill does is it helps match people who need bone marrow transplants to cancer patients. That's what it does. It gives funding for that. So now, let's see what their defense is, because there's two parts to defense. So Marjorie Taylor Greene's defense is, nothing in this bill prevents the funding of abortal fetus tissues by taxpayers. It opens the door for the National Institute of Health to use this bill to research the remains of babies who were murdered in the womb. Now, this is so stupid on so many levels. I don't know how to explain this to you in a way that isn't crazy, but so according to Marjorie Taylor Greene, any single bill that does not explicitly say you can't use this money for fetal tissue, she has to be against. Unless you're using this against for stem cell research, I have to be against this bill, which makes no sense, because every single bill that she's going to vote on none of them say that, because that's not a thing. Also, this is also another incredibly dumb thing. Boebert said this bill added hundreds of millions of dollars to the national debt while not receiving a congressional budget office score or going through the committee process. Do you know why that's happened? This bill has been re-upped at least 3 times. It was 2005, 2010, 2015 it was re-upped. And the reason it doesn't get a budget score or go through a committee process is because it helps people. And it's so minuscule, hundreds of millions of dollars is nothing. In terms of how much our government spends. This idea that it needs to be scored when all it is doing is helping people get to donors makes no sense. And this is worth mentioning, that these people have no idea how government works. Marjorie Taylor Greene is a crazy person. She absolutely is. Proves it time and time again. Lauren Boebert is just really dumb. She just doesn't understand how things work. Every time you read her tweets, anything she says, they just don't make sense. So let's go to this next one. It's a renewal of the stem cell therapeutic research. So this was added on. So what this also allows for stem cell research, which is part of her argument. You can't do stem cell research. But look, they need to do stem cell research, and stem cell research is donated. So this is just more stupidity. They just don't understand. But this is where it really gets started. So Punchbowl News, and this has been backed up by people who've said this, is talking about this America First caucus. This was started with Marjorie Taylor Greene and Representative Gosar. Now, Paul Gosar, his family has done 2 separate ads when he's running. One when he was running, and it said, "Do not vote for him. Our brother is not a good person to be voting for." That's his family. Then it was like 5 or 6 of them that came out and said, "Look, do not vote for Paul. He's not a good candidate." They recently came out with another one that said, "Oh yeah, he's part of the reason for the insurrection, and you need to look into him and make sure he faces punishment for that." Here's the other thing that happened. I actually started my channel around this time, but during CPAC, Republican Paul Gosar appeared at the White Nationalist Political Conference before attending CPAC. This was far-right. Nick Fuentes is a neo-Nazi. He was in charge of this. You don't hear crickets about this. Nobody has condemned Paul Gosar for showing up at this white supremacist rally. So now we get the American First Caucus. Let's see if we can find more of this. So this is what they've covered. So this is how they describe immigration and infrastructure policy. Oh, and also adding to this this conference is everyone's favorite person, Matt Gaetz. Matt Gaetz is now part of this conference as well. What they're pushing is just straight white nationalism. So under the immigration section, America is a nation with a border and a culture strengthened by common respect for uniquely Anglo-Saxon political traditions. History has shown that societal trust and political unity are threatened when foreign citizens are imported en masse into a country, particularly without institutional support for assimilation and an expensive welfare state to bail them out should they fail to contribute positively to the country. While certain economic and financial interest groups benefit immensely from mass immigration, legal as well as illegal, and the aggregate output of the country increases, the reality of large segments of our society, as well as the long-term existence of future America as a unique country with a unique culture and unique identity, is put at an unnecessary risk. They're saying here is that we need more Anglo-Saxon. Anglo-Saxon is code word for white people and Europeans. And the strange thing is, the term Anglo-Saxon isn't even defined as just what Europeans are. A whole lot of Europe falls under the idea of Anglo-Saxon. So this is just naked white supremacy. That's what this is. Under the infrastructure section, the American First Caucus will work towards an infrastructure that reflects the architectural engineering and aesthetic value that benefits the progeny of European architecture, whereby public infrastructure must be utilitarian and stunning, classically beautiful, befitting a world power and source of freedom. Look, that just makes no sense. The European architecture is vastly different. And as it comes for public infrastructure, you don't believe in public infrastructure. They just fight to defund it at every chance. Also, where are you going to do these things? Because stories that aren't getting covered is part of our housing crisis is that when they build these new complexes, they build them out and then they sell them to either massive corporations who just paid cash and just outprice regular Americans, or they sell them to overseas corporations because they know that there's no better long-term investment than just in the American housing market, and that's what they put it in. So that's where they hide their money, is in these infrastructure things. So look, this is just naked white supremacy here, and we're going to just go to the other stories. So now we're going to go talk about, very briefly, we're going to talk about James O'Keefe. Now, like I mentioned at the top, James O'Keefe was he was on Twitter, and he got removed. His most recent expose was talking about CNN and how CNN had a bias toward getting rid of Donald Trump. And a lot of Republicans pushed on it, and they said, "Oh, we got to believe this. This is communism. This is how they brainwash you. Get rid of CNN." But the problem was who pushed this message. James O'Keefe has a history of lying and falsifying claims when it comes to these particular things. That's who pushes these things. So he lies about this. He has a repeated history. So he recently did one. This was October 2020. So this was right around the election. There's no proof of. So he basically claimed that Ilhan Omar and another rep in Minnesota was paying cash for ballots, voter schemes. That's what they're arguing. So there's a 17-minute clip. It relies on unnamed sources, covert footage, and uncorroborated translations from Somali to English as to allege that a canvasser for Omar and City Council candidate Jamal Osman paid for voters in a recent election. So basically what he said is they went undercover and they got all this information, but everything pushes back on this. Apart from the words of Jamal and video footage from one other unnamed source, these claims are unsubstantiated. There's no link between Representative Ilhan Omar and the allegations of alleged fraud. They just magnified this. The Snapchat clips aren't dated, so they don't know where any of this came from. There's a lot of information that says that they didn't translate this correctly. So it's taken out of context, and this is a coordinated disinformation campaign because when the Trump administration, not the Trump campaign, and one of the kids posted this, it wasn't the link from Twitter when it came out on Twitter because they had sent it to them first. So here's about Project Veritas. Project Veritas has attracted skepticism for its tactics in the past, including selective editing and undercover reporting. In 2010, James O'Keefe, its founder, was convicted of a misdemeanor for assuming a false identity under a federal building. In 2017, a woman linked to Project Veritas encouraged the Washington Post to publish a false sexual assault allegations against the Senate candidate Roy Moore, a Republican from Alabama. So this was one of the things they were doing. They were pushing for fake sexual assault allegations to say, oh, look, this is not how Roy, they're making all this stuff up about Roy Moore, because if you don't remember who Roy Moore was, because that was 100 million years ago in 2017, he was the candidate who was a credibly accused child molester. And the Republicans were like, yeah, we can deal with that. Also, another thing to this Washington Post piece, it won a Pulitzer Prize for how good it was. Let's look at this. So this is the person for... This is the subject of it. This is the guy who they misquoted a lot. He's the brother of the congressman, and they offered him money. So says he was posted by a community activist who was the insider, appeared to be their primary source. Told the Project Veritas would pay him $10,000 to say he was harvesting ballots for Congresswoman Ilhan Omar, and they're basically saying, it's not your brother. Who cares? And then let's go back down to the bottom. And a lack of verifiable intelligence, allegations of misrepresentation, entrapment, and the coordination with conservative caucuses have been part of Project Veritas' method of operation. There's evidence that the voter fraud story was coordinated with the Republican Party and rushed in publication to distract from the New York Times blockbuster on President Trump's effort. Okay, so this came out the same time we found out that Trump paid like $8 in federal taxes. So this came out from Mike Lindell, who's the founder and CEO, and he's also the Trump Minnesota campaign chair. So he knew about this. So the whole point of this was to cover up for Trump. Like, they actually were doing this story, but they pushed it out faster to cover up for Trump. So let's go to this. This is more follow up to the actual inside of how people in the Trump organization tweeted this when it was coming out. before the article came out. So it said the video that the younger Trump posted did not have the "from James O'Keefe" label that appeared when other Twitter users shared the video uploaded by Mr. O'Keefe. This detail, along with video metadata demonstrating that the Donald Trump Jr. version of this video was separately uploaded and encoded by Twitter, indicating that the Trump campaign possibly had access to the video before the general public, and raises questions of coordination. So there's that. Now we're going to go on to the next one. So this was the other story. So they found this guy, and they got him to sign an affidavit saying that he saw voter tampering with the ballots. So the federal investigators look into the accusation from Project Veritas that Pennsylvania postal workers tampered with mail-in ballots. The claims were false. 2016, produced an affidavit from a whistleblower postal worker in November, claims he overheard other postal service employees in Erie County, Pennsylvania, backdating ballots that arrived in the mail. So they could, this would have been illegal. He then recanted the affidavit he signed a day later. The video shows that there was other people when he swore the affidavit over Zoom. And then this was pushed by more Republicans to prove that, voter fraud was real. And then their physical examination of ballots produces no evidence of any backdated presidential election ballots at the Erie Post Office. So then there's this. U.S. Postal Service released a report and claims that the employees tampered with Pennsylvania ballots. Found no evidence for the accusations first brought by Project Veritas. They looked into this, and then he recanted the affidavit. We went over this. Let's see. Donald Trump and Lindsey Graham used this. The OIG report is yet another failure for Project Veritas, run by the conservative activist James O'Keefe. The organization is known as serious high-profile sting operations. Basically attempt to, best known for attempting to plant false sexual misconduct allegations against the 27. So, look, this is just more evidence. This is him on the recording. There's also he was talking to the FBI, and then Project Veritas basically recorded him or got his recording when he was talking to the FBI, and they released it saying, this will defend us. That's not what it did. He said he's upset. I'm sorry for how this turned out. I didn't realize what they were telling me. I didn't really think this through. I didn't know why this happened. I didn't know how, I don't really know what they said. Maybe my mind filled it in. This is possible that I don't know what I'm talking about. So basically, these are the last two things I've shown you. I'm not covering the CNN one because it's irrelevant now that he's gone. So to be clear, and I've talked about this before in other videos, there is a history and a pattern of Project Veritas and James O'Keefe actively lying and spreading disinformation. Now, him being kicked off is not part of big tech silencing the right. It's Twitter actually using its terms of service, because Twitter is a private company and they're allowed to do this. You don't have a First Amendment right to Twitter. I don't have a First Amendment right to Twitter either. I also don't have a First Amendment right to this YouTube channel. I have agreed with YouTube to subscribe to their terms of service, and if I break those, they have a right to get rid of me. That's the way this works. YouTube and Twitter are not free speech. That's just how it is. So James O'Keefe, I'm not sure what exactly term of service he broke, but him being gone is not some bloated journalism. It is a right-winger who spread blatant false misinformation and was actively lying to people over and over again to create these false stories. And it was proven time and time again. So anytime you see someone defending Project Veritas or James O'Keefe or uploading something from them in the future, know that they're actively lying. They're allowing this person to lie to them, or they're lying to you on their behalf. Whether it is Don Jr., whether it is Ben Shapiro, whether it is Matt Gaetz, whether it is any of these chuckleheads. Anything to do with Project Veritas is not credible. It's as simple as that. Maybe the words are said by the people, but it doesn't mean it's not edited. It doesn't mean they're not lying about the way they present this. I actually haven't talked about Project Veritas since the Bodies Under the Bridges thing, because that was another thing they pushed out. So now we're going to go talk about court packing, which is the new Republican argument, because Representative Merkley and Jerry Nadler introduced a bill in the Senate to expand the court from 9 to 13. So Republicans immediately decry, oh no, this is court packing. We can't allow this to happen. This will destroy the Constitution. This is going to break democracy. How dare the Democrats do something that we have already done? And let's get to that. So back in 2015-16, Barack Obama was trying to fill a Supreme Court seat with a person called Merrick Garland, who's currently the AG. Mitch McConnell used a little-known and made-up rule that the President of the United States can't fill a court seat 1 year out from an election because the American people are going to decide. What happened after that was Donald Trump then won the presidency. However, for that entire year, the Supreme Court had 8 members. Now, the 9 members we have on the court is not a set number from the Constitution. That's not how this works. That is not how there's nothing in the Constitution that says anything about the court. There just isn't. What then happened was they put in Neil Gorsuch. Then one of the justices resigned, and they pushed through Brett Kavanaugh. Then Ruth Bader Ginsburg died. And she died about 2 months before the election started. Yet somehow, the Republicans were able to push through Amy Coney Barrett with 8 days before the election, proving that this idea that you can only you can't put a Supreme Court justice a year out before election means nothing as long as the Republicans are in charge. Now, for every disingenuous Republican, including Mitt Romney, who quotes, the Democrats are trying to pack the courts and, the American people don't want this. Let's be clear about something. Had you had the courage to say no to Amy Coney Barrett and truly believed that Donald Trump was going to win, then you would have said, let's wait till the election. We have already set this standard. Let's keep this standard. But because pretty much every single one of you, except for, I believe, Lisa Murkowski, voted to confirm Amy Coney Barrett, that's how it is. You've already packed the court. It should not have been. Trump should have gotten maybe should have gotten 1 justice under your own definition. No, he should have gotten 2. He should have gotten Gorsuch to Kavanaugh because he did win in 2016, so he was able to put Gorsuch on the bench, and then the retirement allowed to put Kavanaugh on the bench, but he should not have gotten Coney Barrett, according to the Mitch McConnell rule. Now, this bill is already dead on arrival because, like everything that has to do with the filibuster, that isn't filibuster-proof, which is everything that's not a reconciliation bill, it will not pass the Senate. Further, this won't even pass the House because Nancy Pelosi said, I'm not going to bring it to the floor. So, good old Nancy Pelosi is deciding we're not even going to allow this to happen. They want to have a commission to figure out how to fix this. Look, the court packing idea came from Pete Buttigieg. That was part of one of the reasons I originally started being interested in him, is because his ideas on court packing. So I was interested to him talking about how the justices might be, instead of having a lifetime appointment, being a rotational appointment. There are other things like that. But let's see why a bill like this is necessary and why it makes no sense that this argument to be that the Republicans say that Democrats are trying to pack the court. Donald Trump compared to recent other judges in appointing. He appointed more federal judges, almost as many federal judges, in his 1 term to the appeals court than Obama did in his 2 terms. 174 district court judges, 54 appellate judges. He flipped of several appeals courts. So he flipped them from being Democrat to Republican. Let's see if I can find that direct. I don't care that he didn't pick women. Okay, more than a quarter of active federal judges are now Trump employees or appointees. So that means and a lot of this was because Mitch McConnell, was one of his big goals. Mitch McConnell cares about two things: tax cuts for the wealthy and keeping control of the courts. So what happened was he kept a whole bunch of them open under Obama. And originally, when Obama got elected, they had to change the legislative filibuster because the Republicans would stand in the way of any single court nominee. So they had to change that so only a simple majority was required to pass judges through. So then when the Republicans took power in 2010, they stopped all the judges from going through. So they had all these vacancies that Donald Trump could fill. Then he also convinced, along with the other groups, to have older judges step down so they could replace them. And that's how you got to this huge share of Donald Trump being able to control all of these active judges. Now, 28% in 4 years. Now, there's a lot more shady stuff going on with the money transferring behind the Supreme Court. I will link a video in the bottom to this. It's kind of satire, but it's covering the actual information about the money and basically the group that controls the Federalist Society and what their influence on the judges. So let's be clear about this last part. There is no court packing because the Republicans have already done it. They managed to secure a conservative majority by stealing a Supreme Court seat and then ignoring the rule that they used to steal the Supreme Court seat to take another judge in. So there's that. Also, they control most of the lower courts are already filled because of Donald Trump and all the other seats that they stolen. So this doesn't appear to be anything that's going to happen. And the biggest problem with not expanding the court is because of the conservative majority, there's a good likelihood that things that the Democrats actually managed to pass through, like voting rights and Green New Deal and things like that, and control more government control over businesses to rein their power in, will be struck down by this court. That's why we need to push it. And it's worth remembering the Senate majority represents like 49 million less people for the Republicans than it does for the Democratic minority. And yet they control 66% of the Supreme Court. So now we're going to go talk about the other big news. One of the other big news is President Biden has decided to pull out of Afghanistan. Hold on one second. He has announced that we're going to pull out of Afghanistan. He said we'll do this by September 11th. Now, originally, the Trump administration was going to do this by May 1st. The Biden administration says, no, we're going to wait a little longer because there's more logistical stuff that we have to do to make sure that we can actually, pull out effectively and work it that way. So from there, they decided September 11th is when we're going to do it. Now, obviously, the Republicans are all mad. They're saying, oh, how is he doing this? They're banning our allies and things like that. And the military complex is mad about this. Look, we've been in Afghanistan for 20 years. What is our current goal now? Because this idea that we got rid of Osama bin Laden a decade ago. Why are we still there? What's going to change with us being in there for another year? And this argument of, we've created a power vacuum. We knew this when we went in, that we were going to create a power vacuum. So there's a good chance that the Taliban will take control of the nation. So hopefully we can, strengthen their military enough that they'll be able to do it. This other idea, and this is a really stupid one, is that we're there for feminism and to spread women's rights. So instead of having the Taliban kill women in the street, we're going to obliterate them with bombs. That's how we do feminism now. Feminism is not getting killed by the Taliban. It is having a bomb dropped on you. Also, if we gave a shit about feminism abroad, why would we do business with Saudi Arabia? Well, that is stupid ass argument. Anyway, this idea that if we do this, then they're going to they're going to fund terrorism from Afghanistan. They're going to send terrorists to attack America. That's why we can't do this. Well, let's take a look at who the actual terrorists are. Who are the terrorists? This is the New America Org. It's an in-depth terrorism in America. They're as American as apple pie. And that's a statement. Far from being foreign infiltrators, the large majority of jihadist terrorists in the United States have been American citizens or legal residents. Hold on, let me see if I can actually find the other data that I was looking for. Okay, here it is. While a range of citizen statuses are representative, every jihadist who conducted a lethal attack inside the United States since 9/11 was a citizen or legal resident, except one who was in the United States as part of the U.S.-Saudi military training partnership. Now, this was the Pepsi-Cola attack, I believe it was. So what does that mean? They're not going to send people to they're not going to get radicalized in Afghanistan and come here. They're already radicalized when they're here. And then this goes into talking about the Trump travel ban. If you look at this, the 16 lethal jihadist terrorists in the United States. Non-lethal attacks. So natural citizens from Iran. He was, as a result, was radicalized, was homegrown inside the United States. This one came to the U.S. as a child. So ultimately, the Trump travel ban would have stopped, I believe, is one of these attacks. One. Look, we do need to get out of Afghanistan. There's no point in us being there anymore. This idea that they're going to attack us makes no sense because the data doesn't prove that. Also, we radicalize people at home. They get radicalized here. They don't need to train them there and then send them over. They have the internet to be able to radicalize people. And if you end up in some of these areas through Facebook, there's a good chance you're going to get radicalized. Also, they don't need to do this damage to us because we fucking do it to ourselves. Here's a look at mass shootings. Because, like I mentioned, there's a mass shooting every single day in America. There's been a mass shooting every single day in America for the last 3 years. This is the graphic. Mass shootings since 2014. It dropped for 2 years. 2018 was 336. So this is almost a mass shooting every day. This was 2019. There's 417. So that's more than a mass shooting every day. And during a pandemic, we topped over 600 mass shootings. So currently, in America, we've had 147 mass shootings. We've had 45 since 8 people were killed in Atlanta. That was a month ago. Literally a month ago, we've had 45 mass shootings since then. We only have 147. Well, at this rate, we might actually have less than one a day. Well, we're not going to have less, but we might not hit the 700 mark. So in America, as we come back to normal from the coronavirus, it is normal now for there to be a mass shooting every single day, because that's what it's going to be. Yeah. So these are the 45 incidents. This is cover them, and let's take a look at where they're coming from. So this is mass shootings in the past month. Here's where they all are. Let's be clear about something. It does not matter where you are in America. It does not matter what part of the country you are in. There is going to be a mass shooting in your area. It is just a matter of time. It doesn't matter if it's in a school. It doesn't matter if it's in a movie theater. It doesn't matter if it's in a mall. It does not matter. In America, mass shootings are prevalent. And this idea that more guns keep you safe can't be true because we have more guns than people. And 2019 saw more guns bought than at any point in history. So how can we be safe if so many people are shooting each other all the time? Well, we can't. This is not an effective way to live. At this point, people are more safe being in their houses, because if you go outside, you're likely to get shot. This most recent one was possibly because of being an ex-employee, and they thought he might be a problem. So, but we don't really have a lot of information. And mass shootings happen for dozens of reasons. They happen for racial bias. They happen for political bias. They happen because You believe the government is a tyrant. There's so many reasons to do this. However, the answer is not to do fucking nothing. That's just not the answer. That cannot be the answer, and it cannot continue to be the answer. We also have another answer, and I'm going to go look at that in a minute. But that is not the answer either, because that does not help. Look, I covered this last live stream, and when I clip this segment and I put it into the individual videos, I will attach the other two videos. The data does not show that having a gun makes you more likely to stop a mass shooting. It just doesn't. And I'm not saying just ban all the AR-15s. I don't think that would work, because there's a lot of shootings that are caused just by handguns. But there should be some type of background check, which is almost universally supported by Americans. And if you don't agree with the background check, why? If your argument is, oh, well, give the government more ability to track you, tough shit, man. Look, the only other option to not having any type of gun control is that every time you walk into a subway, every single person is carrying multiple firearms, and everyone has their hand on the trigger in case somebody seizes the wrong way, and you got to think they're going to shoot you, so now you got to light them up. Part of the reason that police have to be on edge and all the traffic stops is because they never know which fucking person's going to be armed. And I get it. Sometimes you don't know. But we also see a disproportionate amount of police targeting African Americans. They get killed at 2-to-1 ratio. They get pulled over at 4-to-1 ratio. We're going to talk about the police in a minute, because if it's not a mass shooting every day, there's another police killing every day. And there was one today in Lent Park in Portland, so that information will come out as probably be covered by me on Monday. Maybe I'll do it tomorrow. We'll see how bad it gets. But look, mass shootings should not be common. They should not be occurring at this rate. We are the only country that does it. So all you pro-gun people, if your answer to mass shootings is what I described, where every single person is strapped up and walking on eggshells because they're afraid that Jim Bob Nancy, who's standing next to them in line at Subway, is going to have a bad day or sneeze the wrong way, and someone's going to have a hair trigger, and everyone has to start firing at each other. If that's what you think being free in America is, fuck you. Because that's not a free country. That's a war zone without a war. That's not how this works. Your overall need to carry a firearm because it makes you think you need to be a big man like that does not oversee the amount of people who are getting fucking killed all the time. So let's talk about Texas. Texas approved open carry without permit for a handgun. Why? It was despite opposition from local police chiefs who said it puts officers at risk and lets citizens carry a gun without proper training and vetting. This is also the other argument. Oh, we just want good guys with the gun to have it, and, they can get the proper training. We don't train enough people. You just apply for a firearm, and now you have a firearm. And if you have enough bullets, eventually you can kill enough people. The one that just killed 8 people, that lasted for 2 minutes. There was the one in Ohio where the police were on the scene and they shot 14 people. That lasted for 30 seconds. So this idea that more people with guns is a better answer is just not fucking true. What the hell is this? Passed a bill on Thursday allowing open carry. The largest state in the nation to allow non-permit handgun carries. So anybody can go get a gun, and now they have no way to track it. You can just get a gun. The residents must obtain a permit to carry a handgun, which requires training class, shooting class, written exam, and application fee up to $40. Restrictions would still apply to people convicted of felonies and domestic violence. I don't understand how that would be if they don't need a permit to do that. If there's no permit, what is the background check response? He said, called it constitutional carry legislation, argued that many people don't have the time and money to get a permit. If you do not have the time and money to get a fucking permit and the $40 to buy a handgun, you should not have a handgun. What type of fucking disconnect is this? In Texas, they're like, yeah, we believe that people have a right to a handgun, but we don't want them to be trained. And we don't want them to have to pay anything. We just want to allow them to go in. Because where's the... So in Texas, their argument is you need to have identification to vote. And we're going to make it difficult to get that identification. It costs more than $40 if you don't have an ID to get an ID. We're also going to... and now keep in mind, when you register for vote, they have all your information anyway. So you show up, so you're in a database. So voter ID is just another step in the way. It's not the only way to verify who people are. So you need that to vote, but to get a handgun, you just got to apply, man. You don't need a permit. You don't need training. You don't need to do $40. Nah, none of that stuff. You deserve your murder weapon right now. And let's be clear. The other argument is, people get killed by cars and hammers and things all the time. Because that's the other one. Is, you get killed by blunt force objects. What is a gun's purpose other than to kill things? It doesn't have one. What is a car's purpose? Transportation. What is a hammer's purpose? You use it to smack things. You use it to nail things in. It's a tool. A firearm has no other purpose than to inflict damage and kill somebody. That is the only purpose of a firearm. So this idea that the best way to keep people safe, and keep in mind, right after they argued that, right after Joe Biden had his milquetoast, his milquetoast orders, presidential orders, and Texas said we will not allow any Second Amendment rights to be trampled on. There was a shooting in Texas, in Knoxville. Was Knoxville, Tennessee? It might have been the school shooting, but there was a shooting in Texas right after that. So look, last year we had the least amount of school shootings because people weren't in school. They're going to start up again. They're going to start up everywhere. There's a good chance you go to sleep hearing about a shooting, and you wake up to a shooting. That's just how it is in America. I can't stress this enough. This idea that is being pushed out there that more guns make you safer is undercut by the fact that we have all the fucking guns. And this idea that a good guy with a gun will stop a bad guy with a gun is undercut by the fact that the data doesn't show that. And also, the people who say that if you want to be a hero means you have to constantly be training with it is undercut by this idea that you don't need to be training or have a fee. This is one of the most mind-blowing statements I've ever heard. Arguing that many people don't have the time and money to get a permit. You still have to get a permit and get trained. Tennessee Governor Saturday did a similar bill. I don't look. So this was not the school shooting. The school shooting was in Tennessee. I want a logical explanation based in fact where you can tell me, look, no. This is not a logical explanation. Here's the stance. Any single person who is not advocating for a system that either removes the guns or puts harder restrictions on gun control is advocating for the death of Americans. It is inexplicable. It is undeniable at this point. Those are your options. The rate that we are going, the only outcome you can have is mass death all the time. And then they'll argue, we need to put more money into the police and we need to release restrictions to allow more people to get firearms. It's just death. How much data do you need? How many more times do we have to see crying people on the television? How many more times do you have to bury a loved one? The Republicans are advocating for your death. It is simple as that. They refuse to do anything to make things better. They did it with COVID. They lied about it. They hid the restrictions. They downplayed it. They argue against masks. They're anti-vaxxers, and now they've been doing it with guns for years. So tell me this, people who are gun advocates, what is your solution? Because you're wrong on the data. There is no data that proves more guns help people, because it would not help. It does not help us. You're wrong on the data that a good guy with a gun stops a bad guy with a gun. I've been over that data. You're wrong. It doesn't. So are you telling me that you're okay with a world, and I repeat this over and over again, where people just are gunned down indiscriminately because somebody has a bad day or something else, and they decide to just start killing people. And if you imagine, how does this make it better? If you're allowing people to not be registered with their firearms, when it possibly also implies that they're not going to be trained, how are they going to be able to kill these people with a gun? In all likelihood, when you show up and everyone's armed, and then the police show up. Also, we sell hollow point bullets, which are solely designed to punch through body armor. Why? Who needs to be able to punch through body armor in home defense? They're just cop killer bullets. So how do you back the blue if you're selling things that are trying to murder them? So look, and if you have police officers show up, they're already high stress as it is. We're going to talk about that in a minute. But when everybody's armed and everyone's firing at each other, well, who are the police going to shoot at? They don't know who started it. You don't know. If I'm in a crowded area and someone starts firing and everybody's armed, well, everyone's just going to start firing. It's going to rise the death toll even higher. At this point, if you're not advocating for some type of change that doesn't include more guns or less restriction on guns, you are advocating for the death of Americans. It is inexplicable, and anyone who tells you otherwise is lying to you. Until somebody can prove to me with data that any other country allows as many guns as we do, and because there isn't, and that anybody has these type of restrictions, lack of restrictions, and has this type of death count from firearms, and I don't want to hear, it comes from suicides. Yeah, you know what stops having people from getting suicided by a handgun? Not having a handgun. There's no, look, at some point, enough of American people are going to go, you know what, I'm tired of this. Because the Republicans have shown, with COVID, there is no amount of death that they would find to be too much for any type of restriction. And as it comes with gun violence, as we see year after year, there is no amount of gun violence that they say is, okay, at this point, we got to do something about it. That's all there is to know. They refuse to do this. So now we're going to talk about the police. This is the footage of Adam Toledo. Now, I'm also going to talk about some disinformation with Adam Toledo. This footage was released last night, and Adam Toledo was a 13-year-old boy who was shot in Chicago. I'm not going to play the footage. He was shot within about a half second. Now, before we go further than that, the response to this was Sean Hannity called him a 13-year-old man when Kyle Rittenhouse, who we are going to talk about Kyle Rittenhouse because more stuff came out about that, was called a 17-year-old boy, not by Sean Hannity per se, but by Pam Bondi. But when it's a young African kid, because he's Mexican as well, I think, they're a man. But if it's a white kid, it's a little boy. I mean, even Don Jr. was described as a kid. He's like 50. So let's talk about this. The other thing is people like Andy Ngo who are saying that the fact that this kid was his nickname was apparently Little Homicide or Baby Diablos. That's justification for him being shot. Listen, this is, and I guarantee you, or I don't guarantee you, but at some point I feel like I'm going to have to cover a Candace Owens video saying how, he's no angel, so it's okay that he was killed. Because he did the same thing with George Floyd. Nobody's arguing that he's an angel. Also, because of his nickname was Little Homicide or whatever, we don't know the background of it. He could have just had a ridiculous nickname. Just because your nickname could be Horsecock Giant Penis with $1 bajillion, and you won't have any of those things. So the argument there is, because he had a bad nickname, they deserve to kill him, which is fucking crazy. It makes no sense to be able to argue that. None. So the other thing is that my understanding of this case is, let's see if they covered this. The boy does not appear to be holding a weapon. In the split second, he is shot, but police video shows a handgun near the spot where he falls. let's see. The clip shows the officer jumping out of his squad car, chasing him down an alley. Police stop right there. Hands, show me your hands. The officer shouts, drop it, and fires his weapon 19 seconds after exiting the squad car. Throwing something through a gap in the fence as the officer... so it's shining a light. Now, the light that you see is not a flashlight. It's a strobe light. And we'll talk about strobe lights in a minute, and thank you to the Below the Fifth column for pointing this out. That's what was said. The teenager was with a 21-year-old man who had fired a gun at a passing car. The gunfire drew police to the area, resulting in the deadly confrontation. So, basically, somebody else had a gun. And he might have had a gun, but it looks like he ditched it. Even in the pictures Andy No pointed, where the body is and where the firearm is found is not the same. They shot this kid so fast. Now, part of the reason is they're on edge because they don't know who is a firearm, and they're responding to a shots fired, apparently. The other thing is he's using a strobe light, but he's by himself. This is not proper procedure. So let's see what happens when you use a... this is Tactical Concerns. This is from the police magazines, from Police Patrol. This is from 2010. Tactical Concerns. When deployed without the benefits of an accompanying constant light cover officer, a strobe light may make the user experience an inability to see or recognize subtle, deliberate, slow movements made by the suspect. In training classes, I was routinely able to move my hands 8 to 10 inches before my threatening motions are recognized by the students who are exposing me to the strobe. Of course, my movements must be very slow and deliberate in order to avoid detection by the students. Also, exposure to any bright light in a dark environment after low light adaptation has been achieved will affect deterioration in the subject's night vision. So this is the person. But what this is saying is he should not have been using this by himself. Somebody else should have been there, because when you're using the strobe lights, your brain fills in the gaps in between the flashes. So that means you're not seeing things correctly. You're seeing things that aren't there. Look, the overall problem with this and all the other things is the way policing is done. There's too many times that a routine traffic stop ends in a death. I think it was 143 times last year. There are countries that don't have 143 deaths by police in decades. We have it in 1 year from one aspect. And one of the ways to alleviate this appears to be an option of having less police. There's data showing that the less interaction you have with the police, the less likely you are to be killed by them. Another problem is for the police training to change. So one of the things that we could do is make it so that the taxpayers aren't the ones who pick up the tab when the city gets sued by the police. Currently, as it stands, most police officers, if you're accused of wrongdoing and lose a civil suit, the taxpayers have to pay it up. It's picked up by the state. You yourself may not have to take any payments for it, and you may not have to resign or anything. If you actually put it on their pension system, then they would be a lot more likely to go against each other. Because as we just saw, not in this particular case, but during the BLM riots in Boston, the protest in Boston, there was an officer who was on camera. The guy said, "Look, my thing is my vest is on, my camera is on," and the guy was sitting there bragging about how he ran over protesters. And then when the guy told him again, he changed how he was talking about it, but it was still the same thing. And that person is back on duty without any issues. This is part of the problem as well. Maryland has changed how they're doing it. They got rid of their police bill of rights, and they've allowed a tribunal, mostly overseen by citizens, to decide punishments. There are some law enforcement officers on the tribunal, but they're changing how policing goes. Currently, the way we teach policing is a problem. They're too jacked up. They're too ready to kill people. They have too many toys. Now, for this strobe light video with the little kid in Chicago, it is not clear where he got this strobe light, whether it was given to him by the department or he just managed to get it himself. But he clearly did the wrong thing by having it by himself. That's not how he's supposed to use it. So the issue with the policing is they're too jacked up. They need to change how their law enforcement tactics go. And here's the other thing. it's very strange that policing has not changed. There's this resistance to change. Now, everyone says, oh, there's a resistance to change. When COVID first hit, how long did it take for hospitals across the country, once they had an idea of what they were dealing with, to all adapt new procedures to deal with COVID? About a month? Maybe a little longer? But they were all able to do it. When the military has issues with officers with members dying or faulty equipment or things like that, they do something to change it. The police want to be the last part of the military where they're the really cool guy, executing things on demand, but they're not doing the training before it. They're not doing the changes that are required in order to be able to do this. And there's more of this. They're just so jacked up and ready for this. And a lot of it is the people in the police. There is a problem with them. There's a lot of data pointing to a infiltration of white supremacists in the police, an infiltration of neo-Nazis, and issues like that. So now we're going to look for this. Part of more information, BLM. Now this part goes part of the other thing. Every time one of these things happen, we always hear the people say, or the officials say, oh, we don't want any violence. We hope the crowd is fine. The other part of that is always not mentioned. The argument is, well, we hope the police also don't bring protests or don't inflict violence on protesters indiscriminately. A lot of what we saw was police driving into people during the protest, the BLM protest. It wasn't just police, it was other people doing it as well. But a lot of what we saw from camera footage was a response to Black Lives Matter, which was anti-police brutality. And let's be clear, it's not just Black Lives Matter. It's for all police brutality that they're protesting against. So whenever you see a conservative say, oh, why isn't Black Lives Matter talking about this? There's two things you need to look for. Is the person who killed that person either arrested or dead? Or is that a case where they actually there are people advocating for that person and they're just lying about it? Now, why do I want to show this? 93% of Black Lives Matter protests have been peaceful. That's what the report says. Let's see if I can find exactly what it says. 42% of respondents read most protesters are trying to incite violence or destroy property. That is just not true. And part of it is because the media essentializes these type of things. They say, oh, look, there's violence. You got to cover the violence. And Fox News is saying they're all thugs and tries to argue BLM as terrorists. The problem is more so that when you have this idea of mob violence is not the mob will ultimately become unruly. There are absolutely, and I'm not arguing that there isn't, people who loot and rob during these things. The problem is how the police respond to those. Too often, a more violent government response in which authorities use force more often than not when they presented at protest, and that they disproportionately use force while intervening into demonstrations associated with the Black Lives Matter relative to other types of demonstrations. Report the U.S. has a heightened risk of political... So what this means is, and there's studies to do this, that when they deal with Black Lives Matter protests, or any of these police protests, because that's how it's shifted now, they're more likely to aggressively respond to them. We saw this, the perfect example was January 6th. They were told to stand down, and they were not able to respond with the same type of preparation that they were to Black Lives Matter. Because if you remember when you've all seen that footage of the soldiers fully geared out. Let's find it. BLM officers for... Let's see if I can find that exact video. This. We all remember this picture. This picture. None of this was ready for the January 6th. They were literally unarmed because some of their shields weren't properly stored in the right temperature, which is something I didn't even know that could happen, to the point where they would shatter when they were hit. So one of the other articles I was reading was a way to deal with this is the police not indiscriminately going after the entirety of the crowd when something happens. It's instead to target what they're doing to the people who are causing the rioting and the looting. Instead of going after the vast majority of people, focus on the ones who are actually causing the problem. And even in a lot of these cases, the organizers of the event will self-police themselves. When the police spend too much time focusing on the peaceful protesters than the actual ones who are causing the problem, they were allowing the actual ones to cause the problem further. And it just riles people up more. So this came out today. U.S. police and public officials donated to Kyle Rittenhouse. So if you don't remember who Kyle Rittenhouse is, I don't think he's a neo-Nazi. There was something about that. Kyle Rittenhouse was a 17-year-old. He is also a boy, just like the kid from Chicago was. Kyle Rittenhouse drove to another state. In Kenosha. He was from a different state from the Kenosha, with a firearm, which he wasn't allowed to do, to go hang out with some militias, to go defend some property against a BLM protest. Now, we don't know what happened entirely, but something happened where a guy was chasing Kyle, and he threw a bag with a water bottle at him. And we believe that somebody else fired a shot, in which Kyle Rittenhouse shot the first guy. He then ran away, and when the crowd tried to apprehend him, he shot another person. So, look, I'm not getting into the debate of, should he have put down his firearm or what. But Kyle Rittenhouse walked away. And he went home before he was arrested for this. He killed 2 people, and he went home. And he was then seen, after he got bailed, he became like this messiah figure for the right. We love him so much. He was basically their, if the Catholic high school kid who had a firearm, that's what Kyle Rittenhouse was. He was then seen with the Proud Boys, oh no, it's not the Proud Boys, the Oath Keeper, the leader of the Oath Keeper, and apparently he was like the leader of a band, just pled guilty to January 6th insurrection. So what is this video? U.S. police and public officials donate to Kyle Rittenhouse, data breach relieves. A data breach of a Christian crowdfunding website. So let's also do this other thing. It's awfully weird that Christians who are supposed to be, love and cherish your other man, are always kind of in the wrong side of this. They're always for the violence. Many of these cases, donations were attached to their official email addresses, raising questions about the use of public resources in supporting campaigns. So the breach, I guess they just hacked this. Include Kyle Rittenhouse, who stands accused of murdering 2 left-wing protesters. So this is what happened. So he raised $500,000 for this. So one of the donations made up September 11th was made by anonymously, but associates with the official email address of Sergeant William Kelly, who currently serves as the executive officer of Internal Affairs. Internal Affairs in Norfolk, in Virginia. And the donation carries comment: God bless. Thank you for your courage. Keep your head up. You've done nothing wrong. Every rank-and-file police officer supports you. Don't be discouraged by the actions of the political class of law enforcement leadership. What this means, this is a recurring issue. There's a lot of other ones. I'm not going to go through all of them. But this one particular is a problem. His job is internal affairs. And what he's saying is, hey, kid, you did the right thing. Don't worry that you murdered 2 people. We, the police, support you. Ignore what the political class says. They're just being PC. This is an internal affairs officer arguing this. That's what they're arguing. This is part of the problem. The problem is not just there is a few bad apples. The problem is when the good apples try to stop them, they're punished, or the bad apples are just shifted around, or the rank and file or they're bad all the way through. Policing has to be changed. We cannot do nothing about policing because the police will not make changes. We've seen this. This is not acceptable either. And let's be clear, I'm not saying that nobody should ever be killed by the police. I'm not saying that police shouldn't have political views. I'm saying this is a problem where the police are saying, I support you for murdering people and don't worry about it. It's a problem, the amount of damage that they do to people. It's a problem, the amount of people that they kill over nothing. It makes sense that a little kid in Chicago would run. It's 2 a.m. I don't know why he's out there. I don't give a fuck. Being out at 2 a.m. with whatever your nickname is should not be a death sentence. Interactions with the police too often result in death, and they result in brutality, and they should not. That is not how this country should work. That is not how policing should work. So yes, pulling police out of shifting more of their responsibilities away from them to something else is definitely the way to do this, because they're not really trained to deal with all of these situations. Having more people who are trained to deal with mental illness, to deal with domestic issues, to deal with kids who are having mental illnesses like that makes more sense. And arguably, we should do what New Zealand does, where they have a separate branch that deals with traffic violations. They can't arrest you. They don't have the same firearms. And I'm sure, look, because of how America is, there will be problems with that. Until we change the way we view guns and the way we view police officers, the way police officers view the people they're protecting, we will not have a country. We're not going to have a perfect country. But we should not have a country where there's an epidemic of mass shootings or just gun violence in general, and there's an epidemic of police violence and police shootings. I'm not saying that the police should never kill anybody. I'm not saying the police should walk around disarmed with bears and hug everybody. I'm saying the training needs to be changed so they can actually de-escalate more often than not. Too often we hear from these situations, oh, I feared for my life, or oh, I made a mistake. And I was talking about it with the Dwayne Wright case, because as far as I know, that is the most indiscriminate one. That is absolutely appears to be an accident. You can see in the video she yells, taser, taser, taser. She shot a kid. And you can see her response is, oh shit, I shot a kid. That's still not acceptable. You do not get to have more power over people's, whether they live or breathe, and then make accidents and say, oops, I'm sorry. The more power you have, the harsher the consequences are when you abuse that power. The higher the standard for you to use that power should be. That's what I'm saying. If you have more power, you need to be held to a higher standard. So let's go to this last part. This is a Trump Twitter era. So A.G. Garland rescinds Trump's memo that curtails use of consent decrees used in investigations. So what this does is it was a restriction on the Justice Department to force changes in police departments and other local agencies accused of abuse, rescinding Jeff Sessions' 2018 memo that curtailed the use of consent decrees in such cases. So what this says is twofold. Under Obama, a good amount of oversight was if they looked at 3 precincts a year. There's something like 100,000 precincts across the country. And if they looked at 3, that was a good year. We need to put more money into the federal government being able to look into policings that have a habit of violence or police brutality so that they can take a look. So we don't just go in after there's another George Floyd or after there's another Devontae or Dwayne Wright or an Eric Gardner. We need them to be able to look at these and say, this is a problem. We're going to deal with it now. So let's hope that they actually do some of this. So let's wrap this up. My final hope is that Americans know better. Look, we deserve better. We don't deserve to live in a country where there is mass firearm death. We don't deserve to live in a country where people are constantly getting killed by the police. And even if it's not whatever the data says, it is too many. There's more things this country deserves that are better. We deserve to have a more safe country. We deserve to have a fairer government. And the way to do that is for the government officials to be held accountable when they don't do the will of the people. Vote them out. It's also for them to push for the things that the people want. Pushing for bills like $11 minimum wage is not what the people want. They just don't. It doesn't track. It's not fair. We need to push for a fairer government. We need to push for better policing. We need to push for better gun laws. America's in a rough place right now. We have the power, the political willpower to do it. The people in charge have to follow up that willpower. What is the point of voting for you if you're not going to do the things we want? So, thank you very much for watching. I hope you all have a good night. I'll have these videos up in the next couple of days. I'll have videos up daily. I'll see how this live stream ultimately ended up. And I will see you in the next one. Thank you for watching. Please subscribe. Please follow me on Twitter at Faces Ideas. And thank you very much.